I'm Rabia Güler, and we as Fidéicommis will be helping you in the process of acquisition and expansion. Our team consists of an executive team, an innovation team, a due diligence team, and a cross-border M&A team. Our compliance officers are Natasha and Jamie, and they specialize in transnational anti-corruption and fraud. Julia and Wendiva are corporate lawyers, and they have extensive experience in the corporate governance procedures that are specific to due diligence in mergers and acquisitions. Our contract lawyers are Zachary and Karina. They will be involved in drafting the contracts, and Ramona and Shanti will inform you about your legal duties and responsibilities. The risk analysis of this process will be done by Roxana and Brugen, and they will assess the possible risk factors. Adil, Saidi, Veronica, and Emma are cross-border merger and acquisition lawyers. Our senior partner is Nita, and she will personally oversee the process that our team goes through the expansion of Orient Ltd. And I will be advising the team, and I will be the translator of the contracts.
My name is Julia Kozir, and I am a corporate lawyer at Fidéicommis, and now I will introduce the corporate profile of the Orient Express Ltd, hereinafter referred to as Belmont Limited. Belmont predominantly operates in the industry sector of luxury, hospitality and leisure, offering lodging services to high-end consumers around the world. The company was founded in 1976 with its head office in England, United Kingdom. It currently owns 46 luxury properties in 24 countries on 5 continents. The company employs 6,000 people in 2018, predominantly in South America, and has an annual revenue of almost $600 million US. Belmont is currently listed on the New York Stock Exchange with proposed shares of 10 million at $19 US a share. Previously, the hospitality industry experienced an overall downturn, causing Belmont net losses of almost 15 million US dollars in the first quarter of 2018. With regard to the major competitors, the list appears to be non-exclusive. Among them are worldwide known luxury hotel chains and quickly evolving online platforms for private tourist accommodation, as well as rival companies providing luxurious rail cruising. Ever-increasing competitiveness in the sector creates new issues, particularly in Israel. In order to preserve significant presence in this geographic sector, it is of strategic importance to acquire all assets of land and building where Orient Express Tel Aviv operates.
My name is Karina Chernyavska, and I will introduce the corporate profile of Carmen Real Estate. The premises of the hotel that is located in Tel Aviv, Israel, that Orient Express Ltd wants to acquire is owned by a company, Carmen Real Estate. The company's director was Mr. Sliva, but following his death, the current director of the company is Anne Slib, his daughter. It is the target company for acquisition of Orient Express Ltd. It was founded in 2017, and it has 3 natures of business: buying and selling its own estate, letting or operating their own land or leased real estate, and lastly, management of real estate on a fee or a contract basis, with an estimated appraised value of $80,000. Carmen Real Estate is currently insolvent, and thus far, additional information on the company is unattainable. Nevertheless, Max Holding BV is the parent corporation of Carmen Real Estate. We also need to take into consideration that Carmen Real Estate has only non-liquid assets, which may be difficult to appraise value, and misinformation of value could lead to unnecessary costs. Thank you.
My name is Zachary Gavami, and I'm going to present you the corporate profile of Max Holding BV. Max Holding BV is an investing and holding company situated in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Mr. Max Shabib is the director of Max Holding BV, who was previously the director of Carmen Real Estate before he transferred his shares to his new company, Max Holding. Mr. Shabib added new investments to his company, including real estate in Hungary, real estate in Germany, and in the UK, as will be seen in the next slide. Max Holding BV owns Carmen Real Estate Ltd, Max 2 BV, and a Hungarian subsidiary that owns the Bolton Lake. Max Holding owns 100% of shares. While these subsidiaries do not play an important role in acquisition, if Orient Express would purchase the shares of Max Holding BV, they would also acquire the subsidiaries attached to it. Now I'm going to explain the corporate relation between these entities. Firstly, Orient Express Tel Aviv, the hotel we're in Israel, is a subsidiary of the parent company Orient Express Ltd. The land where the hotel is situated, however, is not owned by Orient Express. It is rather owned by Carmen Express Ltd. And Carmen Express Ltd is owned by Max Holding BV. That is why Max Holding BV played an essential role in this acquisition, because they own the land where the hotel is situated.
Good afternoon, my name is Roxana Gitario, and today I'll present the legal framework of corporate law. In the first place, corporate law is the legal field which regulates rights, relations, and conduct between persons, organizations, corporations, and businesses. As to what corporations are valuable in this case, they are the hotel corporations which interact with Orient Express, Carmen Real Estate, Max Holding, and Belmont. It is important to know the relations between these four companies in order to set foreseeable expectations in terms of payment, assets, and operations. As to what the due diligence process is, it is an investigation into one or more companies in order to establish whether the acquisition of shares, or the acquisition of assets, or the merger of companies will constitute the best options. As for the relevant legislation, we have the English law, the Dutch law, and the Israeli law. Concerning the English law, the 2006 Company Act will be used, whereas for the Dutch law, they will be considered the official merger and acquisition guide, as well as some provisions from the Dutch Civil Code. And finally, concerning Israeli law, the 1999 Israeli company law will be applied. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ruben, and today I'm going to talk about contract law. Contract law is a body of law that relates to making and enforcing binding agreements between natural and/or legal persons. This field of law makes sure that the rights and obligations imposed by contract towards individuals are not violated. The main actors in relation to our case are the four main big companies: Belmont, Carmen Real Estate, Max Holding, and Max Holding 2 BV. Furthermore, why is contract law relevant to our project? This is because the contract law established a legal relationship between the individuals, or as in our case, the companies, and makes sure that this legal relationship is binding and creates rights and obligations between the parties of the contract. Moreover, it monitors these rights and obligations, and if there is any breach of them, then a remedy is provided toward the party that the breach is made. With regards to jurisdictions, there are three applicable jurisdictions that are depending on the options that we have at the end of the presentation. The three possible jurisdictions are Israeli law, Dutch law, and English law. As for Israeli law, there is the Sales Law Act of 1968. For Dutch law, there is Dutch Civil Code and Financial Supervision Act. And for English law is the Takeover Code and the Takeover Panel.
Okay, I'll be talking to you about the issue of jurisdictions, which is basically relevant in the area of our mother on acquisition. So we'll be looking at four main jurisdictions, which is the UK, Israel, the Netherlands, and Bahamas. So when it comes to Israel, it is important because the hotel is situated in Israel, and in order to be able to successfully purchase the land, we must follow the Israeli regulations. And also, Israel is important due to the tax purposes. It is important to know that there are tax attached to purchase made by our team as well. Bahamas also is relevant because Orient Express Limited is incorporated in Bahamas, and therefore the laws of Bahamas are relevant and applicable in our merger and acquisition process. The Netherlands is important because Max Holding BV is incorporated in Netherlands, so therefore the relevant laws of the Netherlands will be important when it comes to the area of property law, tax law, and intellectual property law. So lastly, we have the area of the United Kingdom, where Carmen Real Estate is located, in UK, and they are also registered in the UK. So therefore, the laws of the United Kingdom are relevant and applicable in our merger and acquisition process. So my colleague will come and explain the next part.
My name is Edel, and I'm going to cover intellectual property law. Should Orient Express Ltd acquire the shares or assets from either target company, the exclusive intellectual property rights attached to these companies would also need to be acquired. The target companies, Max Holding and Carmen Real Estate, are both trademarked names in the Netherlands and in UK. Regarding jurisdictions, there are several relevant domestic and international laws which facilitates for such a transfer of intellectual property rights. The United Kingdom's Trademark Act states that should the ownership of an entity be transferred to a contractual agreement, this transfer will further create an obligation of all registered trademark of the entity to be included in the transfer. In the Netherlands, the Benelux Convention on Intellectual Property Law deals with the laws on trademarks, and it declares that the act of transfer of a registered trademark must be written and should indicate the trademark that will be transferred. Regarding international intellectual property law, it exists several treaties and organizations dealing with cross-border EP law. Among them is the Madrid system, which facilitates for registration and managing of trademarks on an international level. And further, we also have the TRIP Convention, we have the Paris Convention and the Berlin Convention, which also deals with intellectual property law on an international level. Thank you.
My name is Veronica Vianello, and I'm here today to discuss about the relevance of property law in the process of merger and acquisition. Property law regulates the ownership, possession and transfer of lands and goods, and in this case it will regulate the purchase of Common Real Estate's assets by Orient Express Holdings. The jurisdictions that will apply are Israeli law, since Common Real Estate's assets are in Israel, and Bahamian law, because the headquarters of Orient Express are in Bahamas. According to the International Business Companies Act, mergers happening outside Bahamas are allowed under Bahamian law if they are also permitted in the national law of the country where the merger is going to take place, in this case Israel. The basic law of Israel, of Israeli land, states that the land of the country is owned by three authorities: the State of Israel, the Jewish National Fund, and the Development Authority. Therefore, private ownership or sale of land are prohibited. The solution given by Israeli land is the lease for long term. So Orient Express should lease the land following the rules of the real estate regulation. It should ask for the transfer of leasing rights, for the approval of the tax authority, for the land taxation approval, and for the approval of the local committee for planning and constructing within Israel. Lastly, to transfer a leasehold according to the Bill of Transfer of Leasing Rights, the transfer must be registered in the Land Registration Bureau and/or in the Registry of Israeli Administration.
Hello, my name is Mita Bejiashune, and I'll be talking about tax law. Tax law governs every individual and entity who earns income by way of working or through business. Tax law is regulated by government authorities, and the sources of tax law include mainly national constitutions and statutory law. Tax is normally divided on commercial transactions, like purchasing of assets. The registration is also what attracts taxation process. Tax and the percentage usually differ from one jurisdiction to another, and hence it is important to discuss and consider tax law in terms of finance and to answer the questions such as what will be the expenditure of the company if the Orient Express acquires land and the building, or which jurisdiction offers the best taxation coefficient. For this purposes, three jurisdictions is important to discuss: the Israeli law, the UK, and Bahamas. For Israeli law, the act which regulates such kind of relationship is called Income Tax Ordinance Act. And the downside for Israeli law is that it has quite high percentage in the rate of 23%. Therefore, it's going to impose a high expense for the company. For the UK, There are two acts, the Finance Act of 2019 and the Companies Act of 2006. And it's quite similar to Israeli laws since the percentage of tax is 19%. And for the Bahamas, since there's no legislation for Bahamas, the only act that regulates such relationships is called International Business Companies Act of 1990, and it is presumed to be the heaven for stakeholders due to the fact that offshore corporations being exempt from taxation, and therefore Bahamas corporation pays zero tax corporate rate. Thank you.
My name is Emma and I will talk about the first available option. When we talk about purchasing assets owned by Carmen Real Estate, we are referring to the purchase of property, fixtures, equipment, clients, and customer goodwill. Carmen Real Estate would still be responsible for certain payments to protect the current employers and future owners from unexpected expenses. The benefits. The first is the exposure to unknown liabilities is limited, and therefore the asset buyer will have to spend less time, less money, and less resources on conducting due diligence. Considering taxes, the buyer of the assets can step up the basis of many assets of their current tax values, and as a result obtain ordinary tax deduction for a reduction in the value of the asset. And lastly, the buyer of the asset can dictate which liabilities it will assume when making the transaction, which limits the buyer to exposures of unknown or unstated liabilities. The downsides is that according to Israel property law, the land of the country is owned whether by the state of Israel, by the Development Authority, or by the Jewish National Fund. And as a consequence, it is not allowed by national law to acquire ownership over it. The only possible option would be to lease the land on which the building lies, but the lease to private entities can be a very long-term lease. And secondly, from a tax law perspective, this would be the most disadvantageous option, as the Israel tax of 23% of the value of the assets would be imposed.
My name is Ramona Toder, and today I'm going to talk with you about the second available option, which is a share transfer of Carmen Real Estate through Max Holding BV. Max Holding BV at this point owns 100% shares of Carmen Real Estate. However, if we would go with this option, one of the benefits would be that we would maintain the legacy of Miss Hill, and that was one of her wishes according to the pact pattern. And another benefit would be that the interruptions of the business would be minimized, because everything could continue as it goes now. It's just a share of the transfer. We don't need to change the ownership. Another very good point for this option is the fact that we avoid the property tax, because we don't try to purchase an asset, we're just transferring it. And of course, it is cheaper than obtaining the shares of the Max Holding by trying to purchase them. However, we have a few downsides, which are the fact that it is time consuming. It requires a big amount of negotiations and due diligence. There is a possibility of the agreement to fall out, and you're not going to have full decision-making powers. Your decision-making process will be limited because you're not going to have the ownership.
Hi, I'm Natasha Romero, and I'll be presenting the third and final option available to our client, Orient Express Holding. As you can see on the board here, our third and final option is a share transfer via Max Holding and its subsidiary Max 2BV. What does this mean for our client? It means that they'll be obtaining the shares in the parent and subsidiary companies, and thus an indirect possession of the Israeli property. So what are the benefits of such an option? As you can see with option 2, there's a continuation of operations which minimize the interruptions for the employees and for the clients as well. Furthermore, this avoids the transfer of property tax, which is also minimizes the economic loss for our client. Finally, there's corporate growth, as our client will actually have major stakes in 2 multinational corporations. So this moves on to our downsides. As you can see here, we have 3 major corporations with multiple contractual obligations that need to be revised and thoroughly checked. This, of course, can be time-consuming and resource-consuming. There's actually no proper property ownership through this indirect transfer, and therefore we don't reach the final aim of our client. Because as you can see, we actually only just have stakes in the company. And finally, this is not a cost-effective benefit, as we'd have to take in shares of both the parent and subsidiary company, rather than through the actual possession of the property itself. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Norel Bashati, and today I will be talking about our advice. Upon looking at the available options, our law firm advises Mr. Lovejoy and Mr. Raphael to purchase via share transfer of Carmen Real Estate Ltd. Via share transfer means that the buyer takes over everything, from consumers to taxes. This option provides for continuity and operation of management. This process does not contain reevaluation or retitling, thus it provides for less additional costs. Moreover, there's also a possibility to avoid payments of transfer tax, which is impossible in cases of purchasing assets. Finally, the acquirer can assume non-assignable licenses and permits to come without having to get specific consent. Thank you for choosing Fidéicommis. We hope we have given you a clear insight into the process of acquisition and expansion of Oriental Ltd.